Some of you are smiling. That bodes well. You said that.
Last week I got
Almost. It's a bit late. Go around the back.
4, I think.
Round the back. No.
I think there's 6 weeks left,
Downstairs.
including this week.
I'm telling you, that'd be about. As I said, and just in case this is the first time you've attended a lecture, the biggest problem that you students experience is distraction and disturbance in lectures and in workshops. So if people are late, they should know by now that they come in the back so that they won't disturb the rest of you. Right, what are 4 key features of a limited company? Limited company. There are 4, but you may know more. Think back to sole traders. Think back to partnerships. 4 key features.
Are you writing the questions or you know the answers?
Guys, if you're like me and you get nervous before certain events, such as exams, then write yourself a list maybe 1 or 2 days before the examination. Seriously, simple things such as take a pen, take a pencil, take a rubber, take a pencil sharpener, take a calculator, make sure that the calculator is within regulations, all of those things, and keep the list with you. So that on the day of the exam, should you experience any kind of tension or nerves, you can just look at the list, check it off, and you're ready. The other thing that you really must do is on the day before the exam, at least, is find out exactly where you're sitting in the exam. Because when I was an undergraduate, the very first exam I sat, I knew the building, knew where I had to go to. I turned up on the day of the exam. The building was like a rabbit warren. Talk about getting lost. By the time I actually got to the room, the exam had already started, which put me into a bit of a panic. Passed, but don't experience what I experienced. So make sure you know exactly where you're going before the day. Question 2, what are the major differences between a partnership and a limited company? Partnership, when you think sole trader. Differences. What's that key one I was going on about? Question 3. Can a limited company place a newspaper advert encouraging people, come buy our shares, come invest your hard-earned cash in our business. We're going to grow and grow and grow. Give us your cash. Can they do that? Question 4. Has an existing shareholder the right to sell their shares to whomsoever they choose? Put yourself in that position. Put yourself in the position if you were, say, the owner of the business. If you'd started up as a sole trader and maybe transferred, built the business into a limited company, how would you feel? This is pure memory stuff. So objects clause. Objects of the business. Remember what I said? What you should include, what you should exclude. So when you include, you need to make it as broad as possible so that you're covered. So that if you're starting business in one thing and expand into another area, you are still legally trading. So what is the objects clause in the memorandum of association? When you're in an examination, use the examination paper. Look at the previous question. There are 5 key documents. Question 6. Look what it says. Think about what you're reading. Is it true that a limited liability, there's a thing, limited liability, limits the fine or compensation a court can impose upon an individual director if a limited company breaks the law, the director breaks the law? Guys, when you're under test conditions in the exam, you ain't going to be allowed to talk or confer. So this is good practice. Answers next. 4 key features of a limited company. Shout them out. Come on. Limited liability. Excellent. Profits. Shares and control. Say again? Shared control. That's an interesting one. Shared control. Yes. Yes, they do. How are they shown? Can you remember? Good answer. Do you remember how they're shown? Which house can you go and look at? Any of us can go and look at. Can anybody remember the name of the house? The company's house. Very good. You guys are really rocking this morning. It's only 20 past 9. Outstanding. Let's have a look. Right, take your pick. Limited liability, the most important. Remember back to sole traders to partnerships to limited companies. Limited liability. It is a legal entity, that birth certificate, that certificate of incorporation. It can sue in its own name. Very important principle. It has directors. Think simple. What is it about a limited company? It has directors. It also has a certain type of secretary. Not that type of secretary. Can anybody remember? What's the name? Well done. Company secretary. It has shareholders and the company secretary. Registering of statutory documents, memorandum and articles of association, share capital, etc. Registered address. Auditing of accounts. True and fair view. Well done. Public accessibility, which you said, to accounts. Liability, here's the difference to corporation tax. As a sole trader, you're liable for income tax. Taxation you don't have to worry about. That is outside the syllabus. What are the major differences between a partnership and a limited company? What's the first one we start off with? Limited company has to be registered, yes, but more important than that, partnership, when I say partnership, what do I usually connect it with?
Shared liability?
Well, shared liability, who said over here? When I say partnership, I've been saying what this morning? Think partnership, think something.
Sole trader
Sole trader. What is it about sole trader?
or limited liability.
Limited liability. No, unlimited.
Unlimited, that's what I say.
Unlimited liability. So what is it about limited company that's the most important thing? A bit louder, I can't hear you. A bit louder. Who says it's unlimited liability? Hands up. For a limited company.
It's limited.
Unlimited.
Unlimited liability. For a limited company. Hands up.
It's limited.
Hands up who says limited liability. Not bad, but there's still a lot of fence sitters out there. shareholders, registering at Companies House, but the big one for me is always going to be limited liability. Between a partnership and a limited company. You can have a limited partnership, but if you see a partnership, then you have to assume it is not limited. So it has unlimited liability. If one partner cannot afford to pay their debts, does the liability stop there? Who else will have to step up? The other partners, joint and severally liable. But that doesn't happen with shareholders. When you buy a share, the amount of your liability, get this, is the amount unpaid on your shares. So if you take out £100 in shares and you only pay £50, then the amount of your outstanding liability to the company is £50. Is that clear? Sole traders, partnerships, unlimited liability. Partnerships are very unusual. If one partner cannot pay their business debt, the other partners have to step up. Auditing accounts again. Public accessibility, thank you, to accounts. So, can a limited company place an advert? Come and invest your hard-earned cash in our business.
No.
Hands up who says yes. Hands up who says yes. Some twitching there, okay, thank you. Hands up who says no. Well done. You're fence sitters, but less fence sitters this time. No.
No.
Why not? What is it about a limited company compared to a public limited company? Why?
Because there's no rules and regulations.
They are a private limited company, but it is to safeguard us, because the difference between a public limited company, public limited companies have to go through a very rigorous procedure before they're allowed to trade on stock exchanges. It's a very expensive procedure as well. And they have to do that because they have to safeguard us, the public. You had a question?
Oh, no, I was just going to say they go for rules and regulations, absolutely.
Huge regulations, yeah, vast regulations, yeah, but it's all designed to protect us. Hang on, guys. What about this one? Can you sell your shares to whomsoever you choose in a private limited company?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, unless the contract states otherwise.
Depends on the agreements before.
Yeah.
Yeah, but why would you restrict it in a private limited company?
Is there much of it to...
Competitors.
Yeah, private limited company is usually set up, well, people like us, yeah? We go into business, we build up a business, and we want to protect ourselves as far as liability is concerned, so we set up a private limited company. But I might set up with perhaps a couple of other friends in business, and we might have 33% each, and somebody else have, the odd one share. But if something goes wrong, the rest of us don't want that third person to sell those shares to somebody else, or two of those to sell their shares to somebody else, because that means you could lose what of the company?
Majority vote.
Majority vote. That's a big issue. That's a huge problem. There have been businesses where that has happened, where the person who's started up the business, made it a very successful business, has ended up losing control. And we'll discuss that a little bit further on this morning as well in certain situations. 5 documents. This was hard, but you did have clues in the other questions, which is why I said read what you see in front of you, read the exam paper. Always read your exam paper, because there might be clues elsewhere. There are reasons why we set particular exam papers, particularly why I do. So 5, this is hard, 5 documents. What came after this question about the objects clause? Where was the objects clause? Memorandum of what? Association. So that's one of the documents, wouldn't you say? What else? What's one of the differences between a limited company and a partnership? What do they issue?
Certificate of trade?
A certificate of trading is one, yes.
Registry, the house,
House?
the company's house, no?
Register a company's house. Register a company, yeah, they have to. You're right, but it's the documents that are actually registered at company's house. So the question at the moment is, what are the documents?
Statement of liability, limited liability.
Statement of very good. That's very good. Memorandum of association, articles of association, registering the address. But it wouldn't necessarily be company's house, it would perhaps usually be your accountant. Registering the directors, share composition. A limited company issues shares, and again, we'll discuss that today. What is the objects? This is hard, but what's the objects clause in the Memorandum of Association? Can you remember what we discussed last week? Yes? Anyone? Let's have a look. It's what the company is about, what it trades in, and we have to be very careful if we set up a limited company. And it's very easy to do because you can buy one off the shelf. It used to be about £99. It's probably much cheaper these days because you can do it online at company's house. But say you wanted to set up in business as software developers or website developers, designers, anything like that, yeah, programmers, then you'd have to be very careful of the objects clause because you might start, and the guys who are running the Computer Geek Society, yeah, they've started up in one particular area of business. But if they go limited company, one of the things I advise them to do is have a very broad objects clause. Say business is bad at the moment, and you have to turn to decorating houses or something, or you see an opportunity, an old house, and you think, well, that's ideal. We'll buy that and we'll do it up and sell it for a profit, which we can invest in the business, take more programmers on. Well, actually, if buying and selling property is not in the objects clause, for that limited company, it is an illegal transaction. And guess what? If it's illegal, you ain't covered by limited liability. So if anything goes wrong, it's back to the old shirt off the back time. Okay? So this is why you have to be careful. This is why this is important. And actually, objects, guys, if you're going to yawn, that's fine. Just please, sorry. And then it goes like a pretty Mexican wave around. Set it as broad, yes. Set it as broad as possible. Okay? And it goes on and on and on. It's just like that echo. It's awful. Right, what about this? Breaking the law. What happens if you break the law? Limited liability. Will it protect you? Somebody nodding there? I assume that was an echo, wasn't it? Yes. Fine. No. If you break the law, you're going to get nicked. Okay? Okay, let's do today's lecture.
You don't get enough time to write this shit, yeah? It's just too quick. Pardon? For this topic? No, there is one of them is a bit yellowish. I actually noticed this. But the last week I had the next same one. The week before it was like the same but yellowish colour. She got prodded. I was like, buy one get two free. No, it just.
I'd like to cover the sources of finance, balance sheet, P&L.
It's not a Primark one, yeah? She doesn't shop in Primark, she's posh, yeah.
Please listen to me seriously when I say
No,
this.
John Lewis.
Even if you've covered this material at school,
She does the shopping.
please make sure you come to the lectures,
Marks and
come to
Spencer.
the workshops.
That's what she said.
I've got a question pack. You need to practice the questions. There will be a big one in the exam, and it takes a lot of the marks, okay? It is, although it's based on multiple choice, You have got to do the profit and loss account, you have got to do the balance sheet yourself. And you will be asked questions on the figures from that. I know. Yes, you can use a calculator. But I have had students before who have said they did really well at school, they did it for A-level, etc. But when it came nearer to the exam and they thought they'd have a go at some of the questions in the question pack, they found it actually difficult.
You see?
So please, it's down to, trust me when I say it really is down to practice. If you work with me, and you work in the workshop with me and the helpers, we can get you through it. It's very straightforward and it's very important to understand, because if you've got a new software project, a new hardware project, you have got to present a business case. You need to understand this, yes. The exam is going to be all multiple choice. Yes, yes. But, and here's the kicker, if you think multiple No. How many of you, just out of interest, how many of you, hands up, prefer, and I've done this before with undergraduate and masters, how many of you prefer multiple choice testing? Thank you. How many of you prefer, this is important, and I've published findings on this, written questions?
I prefer none of them.
But I tell you this, you prefer none, actually, I don't like them either. Yeah. None would be my preference. Last year, the second years, in electronic business processes, had 2 tests. The first test, they were allowed to take their coursework in, and the questions were in the coursework simulation. And that was for an hour and 15 minutes. The extra 15 minutes was because they could refer to their notes, and that takes time to find the material. That was written answers. The second part of the test immediately followed, and that was a multiple choice question. And it never ceases to amaze me after half hour, you get students walking out. She smiles serenely. Guess which paper they did better on?
Obviously, written one.
Written one.
That's what you're saying.
No, because no written one, because you got all the notes to refer to.
It's the same. It's always the same. And the reason is because very often the distractors are good distractors and you don't know the material, so you take a chance. I used to set negative marking, and here I had one student ended up with -18.
Minus.
Because they've got so many things wrong.
Yeah, I hate that when it's negative marking.
And they got
You put
negative
wrong,
marks
you
every
actually
time they made an error.
get negative. I hate that.
That's bullshit.
Oh, I hope she doesn't do negative because
You work it out, you've got 5 questions and you can pick up 5 negative marks for each question. You can end up with negative marks if you get it wrong. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be different if they didn't have their coursework?
No, this was a multiple choice.
Yeah, but I mean, you were tell their coursework.
Say again?
They had a coursework and they've written accounts, wouldn't that have made a difference?
No, actually it's much harder. You know when you have an open book exam, that's much harder because you've got more pressure cognitively to process the data, and you're also under pressure to look for the data, and if you can't find the data, then your brain might switch to a fight or flight mode, which means you're not focusing on actually doing what's asked of you, which is working with the questions.
I'm doing Control F5.
So multiple choice questions actually are not straightforward. They might seem simple because you don't have to write out the answers, but it's not easy picking up the marks. However, if you practice the profit and loss and the balance sheet, etc., if you practice sole traders, sole traders, limited companies, a bit on PLCs and partnerships, etc., and a few other areas like investment, there will be an investment question. There has to be an investment question, guys, because if you're in the workplace and you've got say you're one of the managers, yeah, and you've got, and it won't be half a dozen, it'll be about 20 or 30 different software projects that you have got to evaluate. And maybe you've got the budget to do half a dozen, maybe you've got the budget to do just one project. you have got to evaluate those projects. This gives you a simple introductory tool to evaluating and differentiating between those projects. But in order for you to do that, you have got to know what the income generation is likely to be for each software project. And the income generation could be as simple as, get this, saving time. If you implement that particular software, it will save a resource. The biggest resource is employee time. Time is money. So let's have a look at sources of finance. Finance. I couldn't find one with a pound on, sorry. Raising capital. What's capital? Let's make sure we're on the same page. What does capital mean? The initial amount that is invested either into a business, into a company, or for what you need. Or a car. The capital you need to buy a car or a house. Okay, so everybody understand that? It's something that you need to have funds for. It's talking about raising funds. In a limited company, and a PLC of course, you've got different sources of capital. And what you do is, in a PLC, you would sell the shares to the public, and they would be different types of shares with different types of shareholders, because those shareholders would have different rights. And the rights are associated with two key aspects of an organisation. Voting, having a say in what's going on, voting, and how much income in the form of dividends they are entitled to receive. And it might be in preference before other shareholders. So, we've got ordinary shares, preference shares, the clue is in the word preference, loans from banks, loans from other sources, and venture capital funds. Not so easy, I know I've been there. But when it comes to Cotton On, you are computing students. Use the opportunity, as I've said before. You have got a finance issue, which I wanted to make you aware of, and most of you have taken that on board, but don't go into too much detail, okay? Focus on the key issues. Preference shares, they pay a fixed dividend every year. So if you issue 5% preference shares, or 10, and very rare, bad times, 15%, you have got to pay that percentage. So you've got to pay 5% on the preference shares. The dividend has got priority, exactly as it says there, or preference over the ordinary dividend payment. So, hey, that sounds like a good deal, doesn't it? Guaranteed 5% every year, and I get it before the ordinary shareholders. How many of you, hands up, thinks that's a great deal, and I'd definitely go for that? Hands up who said no. Right, you are on the fence. You're really not sure about this one, are you? Okay. Might be cumulative. You can have cumulative preference shares. So in a bad year, or in a year that you want to invest those funds in something, then you don't pay it out, you carry it forward to be paid in the following year. So if it's 5% in one year, you don't pay it, you pay 10% in the following year. Is that clear? Sounds like a great deal, doesn't it? Wow. You might get 5–10%. You get it before the ordinary shareholders. Share price is influenced by interest rates. The interest rates go up. You've got your money stuck in a company at 5%, and interest rates are, in fact, excuse me, they were 16, 17, almost 20% in this country many years ago. So if you've got your hard-earned control of the company, no say. You've got no vote except in what affects preference shareholders, so it's highly limited. Therefore, they're not really shares as such, they're more like a loan to the company. It's almost as though the company is paying loan interest. Maybe a bond, yes, a bond could be a better title for it. Bank loan. Virtually every company has a bank loan. Virtually every company, okay? A successful company will expect to earn a higher rate of interest, a higher rate of return than bank interest. Why is this relevant?
You want to earn more than you spend.
You want to earn more than you spend, yes, that's true, but also you want the organisation to be generating income and investing that wisely. So you might be investing it in projects that are going to have a very high rate of return. And it might be as simple as saving money within the organisation, freeing up those funds. But if you've got it stuck, if you just leave it sitting there in the bank account, it's not doing anything. It might be earning a very low rate of interest, but it is safe. Yes, the Financial Securities Act. Yes, the Financial Securities Act. If you've got funds, is it the same limited companies and PLCs? It is. Okay. You're allowed to have up to 85,000 in a bank, and it will guarantee that you will get that money back, which was never the case years ago. If the bank went down, then you lost your money. Banks usually demand security for the loan. So if they give you a loan, they might want it secured on your assets. You need to be aware that you need to read the small print, seriously. Sometimes they have got the option of being allowed to call in a loan prematurely if they think the business is in trouble. That safeguards them. Banks have shareholders. Banks are PLC. They've got shareholders too. They are accountable. Don't forget there is a difference between the shareholders who own the company and the directors who run the company, who are experienced and run the company on a day-to-day basis. Private loans, yeah, you can have private loans from, well, any one of us, for example, family, friends. Debentures are a form of private loan, often for a fixed period of time, 3 to 5 years, for a fixed rate of interest and secured again on assets. Should you not be able to meet the interest for that particular year, then they will say, right, we're going to grab the assets and sell them, get our money back. Because we don't think that the business is going to last that much longer. Loan interest is paid before all shareholder dividends, including preference shares, and interest. So you'd have your profit and loss account. I'm not going to test this in the exam. You'd have your P&L, you'd have your profit, and out of that would come interest on loans, debentures, etc. Then preference, and guess who gets the rest? All the shareholders. Venture capital, the sharks, exist whose business is to invest mainly in start-up companies. But when times are tough, they'll invest in anything if they think they're going to get a good rate of return. And a good rate of return for these guys is going to be extremely high. Not for them at the 5 or 10%, much, much higher. That's what they're looking for. Neither are they looking for a long-term investment. They're looking for something short, sharp. The money goes in, they can get their money out easily. Private equity companies, usually 3 years maximum. They usually want a share in the ownership of the new company. If you are ever in this position, and I hope you are, not necessarily going to the venture capitalist, but if you're expanding and you need to, never, ever, ever give away the controlling interest. So never give 50%. 50% will put you at loggerheads. Never, ever give 51%. Don't end up on the losing end, because then they've got control of the business, and if they don't like what you're doing, they can, quite legally, get rid of you. Many large financial institutions use the small part, because they have vast resources, to provide venture capital. It's very high risk, but the potential rewards are great. So, for example, a lot of the pension companies have a venture capital arm. I actually went to a presentation for one venture. I went to present at nearly every single venture capitalist in the book, apart from maybe one that was at a different part of the country. And I remember going to some very, very swish offices in London, one particular one, and it was the NCB, National Coal Board. And they had so much funds that they had set up a small business venture capital. Specialist venture capitalists exist to provide venture capital to specific organisations. So they might have expertise in computing, in technology, specific areas of technology, in software, biotechnology, for example, and they will lend funds accordingly because they've got the expertise or they can call on the expertise. People can buy shares in a venture capital just as they would do in a PLC. But again, remember what I said, the risk can be higher. If the business or businesses you're investing in do not do well, you could lose everything. So again, only ever invest as much as you can afford to lose. Excuse me. That's another one. Also, you might get tax relief on the circumstances. But again, that's outside the syllabus, so just for your information. Ordinary shares are the most typical type of shares. You normally have one share, but you get this. It gives you one vote. That's pretty powerful. You've got a vote, you've got a say in things. And there have been takeovers of shareholders who've ousted the directors and CEOs. I meant to bring the article actually, I think I left it at home. This point about raising finance, just briefly, thinking outside the box, and I read it in the Times last week. Gnosh, G-N-O-S-H. What they've been doing, or whoever owns, I don't know which way round it is, in hard times, what you can do is you can take, if somebody can't pay you, you can take a share of their business. That's one way of keeping their company going and keeping your company going. So think about that. Instead of calling in the debt, think about taking a share of their business. So, one share, one vote. They have a nominal face value of, say, 10 pence, yeah? And the trading value is not related at all to the nominal value. So you might be buying 10 pence shares, but if it's in a PLC, it could be worth, I don't know, Microsoft, I don't know what the price is, 560, 760, I don't know, 12, 15 pounds a share. Then the minimum shares you can buy are, I don't know how many. So it's the face value has got no relation to its worth. It's trading value. Remember, Mrs. Posh wanted to buy her strawberries. Trading value is what the buyer will pay, and of course the seller will accept. It's the same as when you go into a shop. You are making an offer for payment. You don't have to pay that price. You can negotiate. And it's up to the seller to decide whether or not they're going to accept it. So you see something that you really like. I like that car, but I don't think it's probably going to be worth that much, so I'm prepared to offer you £1. They can quite happily turn around and say, it's your lucky day, yes, but maybe no. But that's the way it goes, and it's according to contract law, which actually contract law is very interesting, especially based on case law. It's really interesting. Ordinary shareholders, this is the kicker, but this is compared to preference shares. You're not necessarily guaranteed a dividend every year. You're not guaranteed it. Preference shareholders are guaranteed, ordinary shareholders are not. But the ordinary shareholders, although they might be last in the queue for the dividend, if a dividend is declared, they get everything that's left. So the poor old preference sharer shareholder might get 5%, but it might be a cracking year for the business, and they pay a big dividend. The ordinary shareholder might receive upwards of 20%. The ordinary shareholder gets everything else that's left over, unless the directors decide to put some aside in the balance sheet to invest elsewhere, invest in projects. Shares are traded on the stock markets, as we've already discussed. So, ordinary shares, the prices might fluctuate by the second. Actually, that's outdated. It's probably by the picosecond, with the speed of computers these days, yeah? Or it can double or halve in picoseconds. It really can, it's that fast. Each company has, as we've discussed before, authorised number of shares. We are authorised to have 1,000 shares, but we're only going to issue 10 shares. And of the 10 shares we've issued, although they're pound shares, we are going to subdivide them, or we're only going to call up a penny on each share. It's up to you. Ordinary shares confer status, and status is having a vote, having a say. And in a PLC, the biggest type of shareholders is usually the annual general meeting. That's when you go and vote for certain things. Also vote on the amount of dividend you get. The company does not have to issue all of its shares. It might hold them back for a lot of reasons, because it wants to sell them at a later date. Or it can have employee incentive schemes. So when the share value is low, a company might buy back, a PLC might buy back some of its own shares. That's exactly what happened with Virgin. Virgin have a lot of different companies. They are a central holding company with subsidiary companies, and sometimes those subsidiary companies are 100% held. That means the holding company has 100% of the vote of the control of the subsidiary company. And at one particular time, that was Virgin Music. Virgin Music went public, they sold the shares, and then as the catalogue didn't do so well, or the rest of the company was doing better, or they wanted to do, actually I think with Virgin what they wanted to do was raise capital to go into the airline industry and then expand into the travel train industry. What they did was they bought the shares back. They bought the shares back. That reduced that liability. And they sold that company. They sold that subsidiary on and raised funds that way. Richard Branson is a particularly clever guy because he surrounds himself by very sharp people. And one of the things, apparently, I don't know, apparently one of the things about working with somebody like Richard Branson is they are full of ideas. And if you've got good, grounded people around you, then they can take those ideas and either do something with them or discount them. He's not very well organised, apparently. And yeah, he's got a red-hot staff. And Virgin Business is well worth a look at the corporate data. That's very interesting reading. Those guys need business. They really need business. I know they have that glossy, wonderful image on the television when it comes to airline and all the rest of it, but those guys know their business.
No, but it's clever because of our price, and you went to close the shops.
They do Virgin wine as well. They do Virgin wine.
Revolution.
Virgin wine.
Yes, that was quite
Virgin
surprising, the
wine.
Virgin fee, that they didn't go
They
much
do,
faster
yeah.
into
They're selling wine. I was
yes,
like, what the
digital,
fuck's all the
music
TV,
sales.
airlines, I know
Yeah.
they do Virgin wine.
But it was also the case with
Yeah.
one final year student I had a couple of years back who was working on
That wastes me of memory.
Sony.
No waste of your
And
memory.
strangely enough, what Sony
No.
didn't have for their artists was, and this was before really kind of social networkings were like mega, you know, the must-do. They didn't have a blog. They didn't have, you know, as though the artist was talking to the audience. And I thought that was a major missing piece for Sony. So if I can see that, you guys can see it too. So go out there and start looking around and making your mark. At the end of the year, the company pays any bank interest due on loans, pays other loan interests, such as debentures, makes provision for any other debts, bad debts, pays the preference shareholders, and anything else that's left, the ordinary shareholders get, provided that dividend has been declared, or the company hasn't put money aside for, say, future projects, future investments. Right, financial statements. Two questions you might ask about your own personal finances. How much am I worth today? Yeah? How much am I worth today? 2 and 6.
How much you off today? 13?
How much money have I got in my purse?
Dave? How much you go off
How much
today?
money do I owe on
13?
credit cards? How much money have I got outstanding on the mortgage?
About minus £8 grand.
How much am I worth today? Today. Minus, oh gosh, I hope not. Minus. I've been there, seen it, done it, we've got the t-shirt, yeah. How does my income compare with my expenditure? My income, how does it compare to my expenditure on a weekly, on a monthly, on a yearly basis? Two key questions. Think about them very carefully. Write them all up, okay? How much am I worth today? Snapshot picture. How much income to expenditure historically over the week, over the month, over the quarter, over the year? Two key financial statements. Two questions you might ask about a limited company or a PLC company's finances. I think that's sole trader, no, it's a limited company, okay? How much is a company worth? What is the value of the assets less the liabilities? How much does it own? How much does it owe? What is it worth? Now, snapshot, photograph. How does the income compare with the outcomes, with the expenditure last year, historical, in the past? In the past compared to snapshot now. Get it? Two distinct statements, quite different. The answers, exactly as it says to both questions, tell a story, but they're a very different story that give you information which you can do different things with. Marconi PLC, as I've mentioned before, once had assets of billions of pounds, but it was losing millions of pounds every month. Two different points of view. Assets worth billions at a particular point in time, but losing every day millions. Different points of view. Property companies, here's the thing with property companies, they have very large assets in property and land for future development. In general, the income is dependent on selling those assets. It's usually a small and fairly predictable percentage of the assets, which is going to come from renting and leasing once you've built the properties. So it's quite fixed and it's quite low. But the assets are in the land, in the property. So the assets for a property company are far more valuable than its profits. Can you see that? Holding the assets is much more important to a property company than just earning a bit of income from renting or leasing. Much rather buy low, buy property low, develop, sell high. Look at the retail outlets. This is quite different, completely different. Retail have got virtually no assets. They don't own the building. They usually rent it. Most of them rent it, yeah? We know that. You only have to look down the high street. See suddenly how many businesses spring up, shops spring up, and sadly at this particular time, the domino effect is still affecting business and will for some time. How many are also closing? How many are disappearing? But retail compared to land, retail have got virtually no assets. The shops are often rented, and unsold stock, guys, let's face it, unsold stock specifically, especially if it's in the fashion market, is going to be virtually worthless. You know, if pink suddenly is the colour everybody wants to buy, and you've got mauve in stock, well, you're not going to have any customers, so it's worthless, so it has no value. It's less than it costs you to buy. If sales are buoyant in the retail market, if sales are buoyant, then they're going to earn more income, so that income is going to be high compared to land, yeah? And income is related to sales volume. Remember with cotton on, the percentage of volume that they sell to in the UK is 20% volume sales. The value of property and other assets, profits are more important to retail than assets. With cotton on, they've got 20% of the market, but get this, they get 30% pounds value of the UK market. In other words, their goods are highly priced. They have got a high price. There is a reason why us shoppers are prepared to pay a premium for it. We might associate it with brand. We pay for brand Nike, the Rolexes, etc., because it's the thing to have, to show, etc. But it also might be a question of quality or perceived quality. And guys, by the way, it doesn't matter if you make the best looking product in the world. If you don't tell anyone about it and you don't market it, you'll never sell it. Please remember that. You need good marketing. I say that for a reason. Two very different financial statements because net worth relates to an instant, assets liabilities relates to an instant, that snapshot in time. The overall value of a company at a particular date, just think snapshot in time, fixed, that point and that point alone. Net income, less expenditure, over a period of time, a week, a month, a quarter, a year, over time. You're looking at your income, you're looking at how much you've spent. Have you made a profit? Have you made a loss? At which point in the year have you made a loss? Some of you are going for the strategy on analysing the last 18 months of cotton on sales. You're doing that for a reason. You want to see if there are highs of selling and lows of selling. If it's seasonal, well, it's like to be seasonal, it's cotton goods. Yes. But there is a reason for that. So we've got two particular financial statements. The balance sheet, it balances assets against liabilities. Snapshot moment in time. Profit and loss for net income. And then the main financial statements, I told you wrong earlier, for every business, sole trader included. Because a sole trader is going to have to do a balance sheet probably, or they might keep their own balance sheet, but they're certainly going to have to do income and expenditure account, which is the same as a profit and loss account. And the tax people are going to look at the profits. Right, guys, I've carried on. Please come back. It's so important. There's going to be so much of this in the exam. So